Thank you, and I'm honored to be with you here today. What I'd like to talk to you about is change. One word, just one syllable, but a powerful, powerful word. On the one hand, change can suggest hope for a new and better future. On the other, it can invoke fear and trepidation for what is yet to come. Change, one word, a powerful word that we will talk about today. Now, when I grew up during a period of time in this country of enormous change. In the 1960s, we had Vietnam, we had the Civil Rights Movement. We suffered through the assassination of John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert, and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And of course, we had the space race. That was a lot of change. Now, when you're young, you want to see the world. I know I did. And in the 1960s, the best way, the most exciting way I could think of to see the world was to become an astronaut and join NASA and see the world from space. But the political climate of that time, particularly around race, was such that this was unlikely to occur for a young black kid like me from St. Louis, Missouri. My mother was a mathematician, and she found that it took until the mid-1970s for her to be able to find an appropriate job and place within her own profession. Many of you probably have seen that film, Hidden Figures, great movie, depicting black women mathematicians in NASA. My mother was not with NASA. I kind of wish she was. But many of those experiences that you saw in the film were shared with my mother as well. But I did find a way to see the world, and that was through the Boy Scouts. My Uncle George, he was our scoutmaster, the scoutmaster of what was then a segregated troop. We were called colored then, for some reason. And he introduced me to the great outdoors. And what I learned was all of those taboos and prohibitions and limitations that existed in our society simply didn't exist in the outdoors. I found the outdoors to be invigorating, liberating, and educational. It instilled a sense of confidence and also a sense of responsibility to protect the Earth's natural resources. And I've dedicated my life to doing so, to enjoying the outdoors and also to protecting it. Now, the picture on the right is taken high atop Mount Rainier, climbing with the then Secretary of the Interior, Sally Jewell, with whom I share a close friendship and also a passion around engaging young people in the outdoors. Because you see, it's indisputable that the long-term health of our planet depends upon the creation of the next generation of environmental stewards. People protect what they know and what they love, but unfortunately, many of our young people have not developed a close relationship with the natural world. And this passion led me to join, about 15 years ago, the board of an organization called NatureBridge. Now, what NatureBridge does is provides environmental science residential programs in our national parks for about 35,000 kids a year. And because I've seen up close the enormous transformative impact that these programs have on kids, I've become an unabashed and unapologetic fanatic for the use of education to engage young people with the natural world. Also, part of my board service of NatureBridge allowed me to meet and become friends with other board members, including one of our founding board members of NatureBridge, a fellow named Bill Anders. Now, if you're not going to become an astronaut, and I never did, the next best thing is to befriend one. Now, Bill was Apollo 8 astronaut. He, along with Frank Borman and Jim Lovell, sat atop a rocket, blasted off into space, and circled the moon for the first time ever. And while Bill was up there doing his thing, he looked out the window, and something captivated him, so he took a picture. And I can guarantee that each and every one of you have seen this picture because it has been called the most iconic photo of the 20th century. Earthrise. Now, as recounted to me by Bill, when he saw this, he did two things. The very first thing he did was to say, "Jim, give me the camera, quick, color film, hurry up, Jim." The second thing he did was say, "Wow, look at that. Wow, look at that." Now you have to understand, these three guys, they are test pilot, Top Gun, fighter pilot jocks, right? The best in the world. And if there's any stereotype that fits these guys, and I know them, so I can guarantee you it's true, is that they have cool, calm, and collected in their DNA. Nothing phases these guys. But this blew their minds, okay? Frank Borman talked about this and said, you know, once we saw the Earth, we lost all interest in the moon. Think about that. You sit on top of a rocket, one of the most dangerous things you could ever do. Blast off, go 250,000 miles. That's quite a ways to circle the moon, and then you lose interest. He said, we peered out through this little window into the depth and darkness of space, and the only thing of color we could see was the Earth. And at that point, we recognized the fragility of the planet we call home and the responsibility we have as its inhabitants to protect it. They went to the moon to discover the Earth. And when they brought this image back, it was circulated through Time magazine and other outlets throughout the world. We all got to see it. And we all understood that this photograph carries with it a moral imperative to care for creation. Now, I'm just going to add one little addendum here, and I think there are many people who would agree with me. And that is that I think caring for creation means not just caring for the planet, but also caring for its inhabitants, that we need to care for each other. The two are connected. And here's how. The esteemed biologist E.O. Wilson asserts through his notion of biophilia that people have an innate attraction, affinity for the natural world, that the health of humankind is inextricably linked to the health of the planet. Okay? And I would agree with that. Let me give you an example. Forest bathing. Forest bathing has been shown to lower blood pressure, reduce heart rate, reduce the production of stress hormones, create a sense of calm. Now, forest bathing, that's just hanging out amongst a bunch of trees. That's all it is, just being around a bunch of trees. But in Japan in 1982, the Ministry of Forestry created an entire public health effort around this that they called Shinrin-yoku, which promoted topiary as therapy. Okay? So let's take a look at this, these Nature Bridge kids. And if you look at this picture, really look at it, you can not only see, but experience what they are experiencing. A sense of calm, a sense of well-being, a sense of awe at the natural world. But these are challenging times, and the Earth faces enormous challenges. We're in a period of change. And the biggest challenge that our next generation will face is climate change. Now, it's clear that climate change will have public health benefits. It's well known. Some of them will be direct through floods or heat waves. Some of them will be mediated through natural systems, such as air pollution or vector-borne diseases. And other will be socioeconomic, such as food scarcity or poverty. Now, how climate change will affect different countries will be different geographies will be different. But what we do know is that we must understand where the most critical impacts of climate change will occur and mitigate them before they happen. Otherwise, we will have an enormous public health crisis, and we will have a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions. But we're not without accountability here. In the healthcare industry, and in particular, our hospital industry in the United States, we are the largest utilizers of water. We're the second largest utilizers of energy. And we all know that our purchasing practices and our waste management practices are not always the most environmentally friendly. We need, if we are to care for creation, to manage our utilization of resources and also our carbon production. Now, there's another change afoot, and that has to do with our healthcare system in the United States. Without a doubt, it has an uncertain future. Washington lawmakers are struggling with whether the Affordable Care Act will be modified, repealed, remain substantially unchanged, and this uncertainty leaves our patients and their families in the middle. It leaves them to wonder, how will this affect me and my family? What will I do? Will I be insured? There have been other political issues as well which bear upon the healthcare industry. For example, immigration. We've seen in California that we now have patients who are afraid to or simply won't access healthcare for fear that somehow this will become linked to their immigration status. And this period of uncertainty leads to anxiety and stress for our patients, for their families, and for us as their trusted caregivers. But I would assert that there is one thing, there is a component, the essential elements of what we do that cannot be represented in a graph, cannot be placed on a spreadsheet. It cannot be voted on by lawmakers or dictated by an executive order. We care for and comfort our patients. We engage with and support their families. And we do so with the utmost of compassion. It's the human touch at every single point along the journey that makes us the healing profession. And we should not forget that in that sacred bond of healing, benefits accrue to both the healer and to the healed. So I started off by saying that I grew up in a time of enormous change. And I started off by saying that when I was young, I wanted to see the world. Okay. Well, guess what? We're still in a time of enormous change. And when you get older, you kind of want to change the world. And I think we can do that. What this means for us as individuals is we need to take our individual responsibility. As a group, we need to assume the mantle of leadership and become role models of caring for creation, both for the planet and for each other. As Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you.